And we know that sleep and mental health are so interconnected. So it was, the stakes were high. So suddenly I spent a lot of time, energy, effort, money to figure out this area. And over time, I began to restore my sleep, but not only then restoring it to how it was, but then actually getting into this conversation of optimal sleep, which I didn't even think was on the table for me at all. And then, so optimizing my sleep from this perspective of different wearable technology and be able to quantifiably point to having exceptional sleep, on the regular, on the right side of the bell curve, was just this whole new reality for me that was life changing, and I could not stop talking about it.
It's January 2026, and one theme we keep hearing from founders and leaders who are scaling fast isn't strategy nor structure, it's sleep. Not a side note, not a nice to have, a non negotiable driver of performance for decision clarity, emotional resilience, creative energy, and leadership presence. So it feels appropriate and right at the start of this new year to revisit one of the most eye-opening conversations we've ever had on the ScaleX Insider podcast, the episode where Molly Eastman, the sleep expert, joined us to say it straight. Ignoring sleep isn't just hurting your health, it's hurting your life and your business. In that conversation, we went deep on why leaders overlook quality rest, what that actually costs in peak performance, and how simple changes in rhythm, timing, and mindset can unlock mental horsepower than another hour in the office. If you're serious about scaling in 2026, which of course I know you are, move away from the grind and the hustle. This episode is more relevant now than ever. Molly, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Oh, so happy to be here. Grateful that you're taking the time to shed some light on my favorite topic, sleep.
Well, you have the wonderful position of being the first sleep specialist we've ever had on the show. We've had lots of
Fantastic.
guests who've spoken to high performance, and sleep has obviously been mentioned as part of that. But I am really delighted at a personal level to have you on the show today, and maybe we'll dive into some of my stats later on. So
Ooh,
looking
good.
forward to
Yes.
that. You know, we've been chatting off there. Our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Molly, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Mm. Well, I can certainly put it in the context of part of, what my mission is to really give as many people as possible on this planet agency with their sleep. So, meaning that they have this awareness that they are actually have the possibility of being the driver's seat of their results with their sleep versus being mystified or confused, or a sense that it's fixed, where you're either a good sleeper or a bad sleeper. I think there's this whole world that gets unlocked when we realize that everything we're doing and how we're living and choosing to live our lives from the moment we wake up is going to impact our sleep results, and it gives us suddenly so many more pathways for action. So that's part of my mission, is to get that message out and how to scale and reach as many, eyeballs and ears as humanly possible. That would be a life well lived for me.
Oh, I love that. And on on a personal note, just to give you a little bit of context, we define 10 principles of scaling. Psyche is the very first principle, and I believe the
Mm.
mindset of the leader either empowers or disempowers their scaling ambition. And certainly on a personal note, I have often found that over the years where my sleep has not been as optimum as it should be, and that was for a period of years, I would be less motivated, let's say, to want to create a bold, ambitious vision for the future, and
Yeah.
certainly felt a lot more vulnerable and fragile as we were scaling. And given the guests that we have interviewed, sleep has been identified as one of the greatest pillars, if not the greatest pillar of our health.
Mm.
I'd love to know, and I'd like you to share with our listeners a little bit of your own journey, how you
Yeah.
become so passionate and energized around the whole topic of sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I hope that my story can serve as an example um, from a place of wherever the listener might be at. So, as you're listening to this, whether you are someone who identifies as being a fine sleeper, you go to bed, you fall asleep, you wake up, and maybe curiosity on how you might be able to up level that. Or you're really struggling and you would like some help immediately, or anywhere in between. I mean, anywhere you fall on the spectrum on this conversation of sleep, I hope that my story can illustrate what's possible for any of us, because I now think of my life in a three-part series, which all has to do with sleep, interestingly enough. And so, on the first half of my life, I think of what life was like before I really went through this whole life changing period of insomnia. And before that happened, I simply, was just surviving my sleep. And I would say things like, I'm a short sleeper. I'm a night owl. It's in my genes, narratives like I'll sleep when I'm dead, all of these sort of ways of relating and surviving to this, what I deem to be kind of this fixed reality, cards that I was dealt, and just play the cards. And as life went on, managing and thinking of this area of life, this thing we do a third of our lives, on average, 26 years are spent asleep. 4 months out of every year spent asleep. So, and yet we don't always think about it very often. And I was an example of that. I did not think about it very often, and I did not correlate many of the deleterious signs that my health and well-being was, not functioning at its optimal state. So I was having an ulcer in my, as I get the thumbs up, geez.
Love that.
I was having an ulcer. I had the beginnings of an ulcer. I had shingles in my 20s. I had anxiety mounting for, the women listening. I had painful cycles and all kinds of issues that were pointing to the fact that something wasn't really working and how I was managing health. And yet I wasn't factoring in sleep into the equation. So then, when as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, I finally then went through this whole sleep breakdown, which was this stretch of insomnia where no longer was sleep really guaranteed in the same way that you might just casually think about, oh, I'm going to go to bed tonight and I'll fall asleep, of course. And yet suddenly it began to be a real panicked question of, well, can I sleep? And then the fear, and this was during a time of international travel, and then adding jet lag into the mix, and all kinds of factors at play. But the stress being a big component there. And so while this kept going on, eventually I went to the doctors and I left with sleeping pills. And having come from a family history of a lot of pharmaceutical use, and seeing, some of the paths that people really close to me ended up, going down, and then the struggle, and just how sad some of the paths were for them. And kind of without an end, now just being attached and needing and dependent on these things. So that was really a scary moment of, is that going to be me to do something so basic, you would think, or given or primal as to sleep? And so, but at the same time, I was desperate. So I took the sleeping pills. And so I took the sleeping pills, but I'm fighting myself. And so it really became evident that if I'm going to impact this area, it feels as if I'm going to need to figure this out on my own. And so went down this rabbit hole to kind of understand, what does it even take to get great sleep, not from a, philosophical question, but from a needs based, I got to figure this out. And because, I can laugh about it now, but at the time there were really dark moments of, if this keeps going on like this, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like I just can't continue on living life like this. Some of the thoughts that I were having were dark and scary. And we know that sleep and mental health are so interconnected. So it was, the stakes were high. So suddenly I spent a lot of time, energy, effort, money to figure out this area. And over time, I began to restore my sleep, but not only then restoring it to how it was, but then actually getting into this conversation of optimal sleep, which I didn't even think was on the table for me at all. And then, so optimizing my sleep from this perspective of different wearable technology and be able to quantifiably point to having exceptional sleep on the regular on the right side of the bell curve was just this whole new reality for me that was life changing. And I could not stop talking about it. So then it just sort of organically grew to these, small groups and online courses. And I'd had a background in nonverbal communication, behavioral change. And so they kind of, lend themselves nicely to this topic because so much about sleep, you can learn all these things. But if you're not going to bring in these behaviors and actually utilize them ongoingly to your advantage, it's just sort of like, this kind of academic pornography, I guess you could say. That's a wild way to say it, but just you're learning for the sake of learning without actually bringing
I
these
hear
things
you.
to fruition. That's maybe that's a first or everyone ever to describe it like that, but
I've been
we'll go
guilty
with
of
it.
some academic pornography in the past. Yeah.
It's a
Learning for the
wild.
sake of
I'm
learning.
still workshopping that line, but so so having said that, on the other side of all of this, what got created was this company now Sleep is a Skill, and the stance and the perspective of sleeping a skill set, I think, still can land as sort of a question mark for many of us. It certainly would have for me when I was first starting on this journey. It would just feel like, well, is it a skill? Aren't you either good at it or bad at it? Turns out that there are so many things that we are doing day in, day out that can be impacting our sleep results and often unbeknownst to us. So many of the things I was doing, I had no clue were impacting my sleep. As a result, now we've built a whole company around this ethos. So we have online courses, we have weekly sleep optimization newsletters, we have the number two sleep podcast. We work with a number of entrepreneurs, and we do have a niche on high stakes poker, which I was sharing with you before we hit record, which is an interesting example or group to share about because they really illustrate, they can feel as if they are really foreign to the average listener. They're in a casino environment designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. But it turns out that I use them as a illustrative example often because many of us are living more closely in alignment with that sort of lifestyle than we might realize. And I'm happy to get into that. But the takeaway is that I, at my lowest point, had it that this was just how it was for me. And this was something that was a given and a set of labels. And this was my fate. Turns out was totally wrong. And so for the listener, my hope is to leave you with the sense of curiosity of how you too could up level this area of your life.
Well, you're the picture of wonderful health,
Oh,
and you
thank you.
have the disposition of someone with incredible energy. So you're certainly doing something right. So let's
Well, right
start.
back at you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Let's start from the start here, Molly. What does great sleep look like?
That's a great question. So when we think about great sleep, we want to understand that sleep is a bit of a nuanced puzzle, if you will. So maybe many of the listeners might think of sleep, and often what I hear people go to is, well, I get between that 7 to 9 hours, which is the recommended amount for healthy adults. So pretty fine. Now that would be pointing to one aspect of sleep, which is sleep duration. But there are so many more factors. So not only is there sleep duration, but there's how fragmented your sleep is, so the continuous nature of your sleep or lack of continuous nature of your sleep, the regularity of your sleep, so what is the timing of that sleep? Is it very commonly I'll see that people are fairly routine during the weekdays or whenever they need to have that particular structure, and then when they're allowed to sleep in or don't have anything on their agenda, then they do. And then that kind of goes out. And that's known as social jet lag. So that's an example of kind of the irregular pattern. And then we can look into the quality of the sleep that you're getting throughout the course of the night, which is dependent on those other things, the duration, the continual, how continual sustainable it is, continuous aspects, as well as the regularity. But then it also goes into things like, what is your heart rate throughout the course of the night? What is the shape of that? What is your HRV throughout the course of the night? Your respiratory rate, so how you're breathing. Are we stepping over possible sleep disorders? And different accounts can even put it up to over 100 sleep wake disorders. It's at a Mount Sinai. So we know that there are many, many things that go into getting great sleep, and then it can become particularly nuanced. We also want to know something about your sleep architecture. Are you taking certain things that could be impacting that architecture of the sleep that you are getting? How fully recovered are you by the subsequent day? There's a lot that goes into this, and we actually have something coming out more recently that it's still kind of in the works, but it's being alluded to, which is a sleep age. So you've probably heard of, chronological and biological age. Well, what's being put together now is a sleep age. And so this would be using AI to get a sense of, say you're, 35, but you might be sleeping like a 52-year-old. And that would be certain characteristics that can make up kind of older sleep. And then when you get that kind of readout, then hopefully that can inspire similar, motivational change that we see when people find out that they're, aging older with their chronological versus biological age. Could we do the same for sleep? So it's very nuanced.
I certainly want to sleep like more like a baby, and
Yeah.
in terms of my sleep age, for the benefit of our listeners, and to motivate them, compel them to continue listening to us for the next 30 to 40 minutes. What are the benefits of achieving great sleep?
Yeah. Okay. So when we think of the benefits of achieving great sleep, what I would say for the listener is think of what's important to you. Like, what areas of life are you looking to take on? When you think of areas of life, there are many. So it can be your health and well being, it can be your financial aptitude, it can be, your romantic relationship, your friendship, many areas of life, right? Turns out that we really struggle to find a single area of life that is not negatively impacted when your sleep is not working. And conversely, that is not benefited when our sleep is working well. And you can see that evidence by you go to PubMed and put in sleep plus just about anything that matters to you. And there's correlations, vast correlations, in just about every area of life. I mean, I'm talking to the nuance of your ability to read facial cues, so interpersonal interactions, your ability to kind of monitor or regulate your emotions on a routine basis, so your ability to connect with the people around you. So those are interpersonal aspects, but then you can span out into cardiovascular health. We know is a huge hit when our sleep is not working. But then it's probably important for many people to have proper brain health and cognition. Well, one of the reasons sleep has been getting more attention in recent years has been about this understanding, relatively new, around 2012, the discovery of glymphatic drainage with a G versus lymphatic drainage with an L. And lymphatic drainage with a G being that cleansing process of the brain while you're sleeping, largely in the first half of your night. And so, if you're not consistently getting that glymphatic drainage to clear out that kind of waste and accruing buildup throughout the course of the day, it appears to then have a result of a accruing of amyloid beta plaques, which seems to be correlated with some of our neurological disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. And previously, we might have thought that there might not be too much we could do to stave that off, decades in advance. Well, it looks like sleep might be one of those things that you could do to set yourself up powerfully, but that would be the decades down the road. But even on the front end, we can imagine then if you're not able to properly cleanse that brain throughout each night, then that could impact your sharpness, if you will. So we see error rates go up and a number, almost like a drunk-like behavior if we have consistently poor sleep even just a few nights, and other things that happen even just a few nights. We know if anyone's ever tracked their glucose, so like I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor right now. And so if we have a short night of sleep, even just one, two, three, couple short nights of sleep, then we see impacts in your just resting glucose rate kind of just go right up. And so the choices that you're likely to make in the kitchen become in question because now your body's pulling for that quick hit. Of that kind of glucose and that response to aid, that ups and downs and crashing that you're likely to exhibit. So the list is really endless, and then it goes into other things. How often are you going to get sick? Immune function, your aging, so beauty, so the amount of fine lines and wrinkles. A lot of people care about longevity right now. It's become a bit of a buzzword, understandably. Who doesn't want to live longer, most likely? And so all of these things come into question and more. I'm just touching on some of the top aspects. If you're an athlete, your, kind of quick response time, your ability to make some of those life-changing moves that can be really important for your career. It's just countless. Your ability to get in your car and not fall asleep behind the wheel, to not get into life-threatening car accidents. It's just there's a lot.
Share some, one or two really compelling statistics or facts around sleep deprivation that would shock our listeners.
Sure. So, one that I like to point to, because so many people I shared that often people begin with the sleep duration piece, and that as their kind of guide for how well they're doing or not doing with their sleep. So when we think of sleep duration, now that's reductive because there's so much more, but starting there. We do have a very a large dearth of research around sub 6 hours a night asleep. So there was a large meta-analysis that came out in 2010 that did find that when people are consistently getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, it sets them up markedly for a clear increase in heart attack, stroke, cognitive decline, and my favorite one, all cause mortality, death from any cause going up shockingly, just simply from managing that sleep in a shortened way. So that is just even one aspect of our sleep and management of our sleep. And then even beyond that, one thing that I share a lot that goes into some of our ethos that's a little out of the box of how we help support people with their sleep, has to do a lot with circadian rhythm entrainment. And so one thing that might shock people is that just last year, nearly 250 circadian scientists, so people that, their whole life is about kind of the understanding of research around circadian health and biology. They are all calling for one action to be taken, and they're citing nearly 2,700 peer-reviewed publications as their evidence for this one action. And the action is that they would like to see warning labels put on light bulbs when used at night, which can sound maybe wild. Like I would assume, if you're a betting person, I would assume that just about every person listening, this applies to every single person, because if any of us are in the modern society, we know that it rates around 99.9% of people are under some sort of electric light. And so why would people put their entire reputations on the line to ask for warning labels on light bulbs when used at night? And they're citing, of course, the impacts on our sleep wake, but even surprisingly, impacts on things like obesity, impacts on cancers, reproductive disorders, psychiatric disorders, diabetes, and more, just simply from the use of our banal, 60-watt light bulbs at night. So it just goes into this whole world of there are likely things that we're all doing that could be impacting not only our sleep, but our health as a whole and how we're viewing the world. So the psychiatric aspect of it can come into play, just how, as a result of how we're managing or maybe not managing our sleep.
And back to our psyche in terms of the importance of psyche in a scaling context, how we see the world is everything in
Yeah.
terms of either realizing a large, expansive, bold vision or not. You've mentioned lighting at night as a potential impediment, not a potential, as an impediment to our sleep quality. Can you share with our listeners, and let's make no assumptions here about what people understand impacts their sleep quality or not. Can you share with our listeners the impediments to getting that optimum sleep?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might help to start at the beginning with how the umbrella that we use of all of our kind of our protocol at Sleep as a Skill is all under the umbrella of circadian rhythm entrainment. And so this is coming out of our study in chronobiology, and that's the science of time and how time affects our biology. So chronobiology looks at in many people, of course, and I've already alluded to this conversation of circadian rhythms, but it might help to define those rhythms, right? That like 24-hour rhythm that as human beings we are connected to, that previously when we lived outside, then it kind of just happened, just worked because we were aligned with the rising and the setting of the sun, and our behaviors were all in sync with those things. And because we're diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night versus, nocturnal rats or something, like not, we're not the opposite. When I talked about the poker players, they're kind of living closer to a nocturnal lifestyle. Our shift workers are dealing with that. But sadly, many of us are not quite realizing the impact of our phase delaying, which means that we're going to bed later and later as kind of a society and just saying, oh, well, I'm a night owl, so that's what that is. Maybe not realize, and I used to say the same thing, by the way. So no shame in the game. So what I would say is that when we understand the circadian rhythm entrainment piece, we can understand what are some of the aspects that we can utilize straight away to impact our sleep results. And it would also speak to those impediments. So one, we always begin with light dark environment. And I would wager that just about every person listening can use some support with the management of their light dark environment. I mean, I'm in this conversation all the time, and yet I have to constantly keep working to up level those results. Because why? Because our entire society is set up to be to not pull for what this would look like. So I'll explain. So one of the things that we're dealing with is that in 2001, the EPA found that the average American was spending about 93% of their days inside. So that breaks down to in an indoor environment, in an automobile, that sort of thing. So when you're in those environments, it is cutting you off from the rhythms of nature, and that is wildly problematic for our sleep, because it turns out that there are these zeitgebers, which means time giver, and the zeitgebers that we want to be aware of are the most impactful things that can hit at your circadian rhythm, the strength and the pulsing of your circadian rhythm. And we know that light dark is number one. So if you get nothing else out of what I'm talking about for today, I hope that you can understand that your light dark environment is crucial. And it's partly because the light that's in your environment will hit your eyes, and directly behind that, connected to that, is your suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that's your master clock that keeps us all on time.
Let me just
Yes,
clarify this again for our listeners. So
please.
light dark is critically important in terms of positively or otherwise impacting on our sleep quality. So what I've heard before in listening to yourself, Andrew
Yeah.
Huberman's Lab podcast, is the importance of getting light first thing in the morning, going outside. Now, living in Ireland, we don't get, we're not blessed
Yes.
with an abundance of sunlight. So let's get super practical here in terms of understanding this light dark. I'm in a beautiful
Yeah.
podcast studio at the moment. There are windows all around, but I'm inside. So, is this, do I tick the box for the light environment here, or are we saying we need to get outside and we need to be outside for X% of the time that we're awake? What give me, or I like personally, and I know certainly our listeners, give
Yeah.
us a simple steps here to work towards in the context of optimizing light dark, which will ultimately optimize our sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great distinction. So a few things. One, um, unfortunately, while having that light environment in your space, the windows is helpful. So we know there are certain studies in different hospital environments that when patients are in rooms that do have windows and they get access to that kind of circadian cueing mechanism, that can be helpful in speeding up their release rate. So how their healing is impacted simply by that presence of that light through the window aspect. So it's still better than being in a dark room, but it is absolutely insufficient from an optimization perspective. So, I'm talking to you, I've got all these windows behind me. Right. But this would be if I'm looking to optimize my health and well being, I would be resting on my laurels to just get light exposure from behind these windows because it's adulterating the type of light that's coming through. So, what you're left with is a kind of alien light form type. So, meaning that it's something that we wouldn't be exposed to in nature. So, it's a non native type of lighting that the body doesn't quite know what to do with. And so, meaning that when we lived outside for thousands of years, what would we be exposed to would be a very dynamic light source. So you would wake up to sunrise, which would have a large amount of infrared light present. And, people will spend lots of money to have infrared panels and red light panels. And I get it. I mean, I have them too. But you can also get them for free if you go outside. And so when you are looking at that sunrise, that gives a whole set of information to those clocks. So not only that suprachiasmatic nucleus, that master clock, that choreographer, but it's communicating to trillions of clocks in every cell and organ in your body. And this is really crucial because all of those aspects and different, your digestion has a whole different set of tasks that it needs to take on at the right times and it needs to take it on. And if it's being told that it's the wrong time based on what you're sampling in your environment because you are controlling what information you're giving to your body and what time the body thinks it is based on your environment that you are choosing to live in, that's a big deal. So, what would that look like from a kind of protocol perspective? So, one, we want sunlight anchoring. This is kind of coined from a researcher, Dan Party, out of Stanford. So, we want to anchor our day with sunlight and ideally within about the first 30 minutes to max an hour upon awakening, that you're getting that bright light exposure and that you're physically getting outside, no sunglasses, hats, any of those things and not from behind those windows so that you're physically getting outside, even if it looks weird, even if you have to like open up a window and stick your head out, whatever you got to do.
What if it's
Um,
cloudy?
so even if it's cloudy, it's going to still have more lux output than it would inside, believe it or not. And the wavelengths of light are different than anything you would get inside. So the wavelengths of light will have more of those reds, there's violets, there's all kinds of, it's a rainbow of options that you just can't get indoors. So you still get those benefits. Now, even from a behavioral perspective, if we can begin with, say, 10 minutes to get a win under our belts for the first part of first part of the day, if we can get it from 10 to 20, that would be ideal. So that, kind of like a walk around and, even if you have listen to a podcast, have a call, whatever you could do to make that part of your routine, that would be great. Even if you bring your laptop outside or you have your phone and you're doing all the normal stuff you would be doing indoors, if you can bring that outdoors, that's what we're looking for. So yeah, go ahead.
So let me, and I'm bringing it back to my own situation here.
Yeah.
Um, Myself, my wife, we're typically 5 o'clock in the morning wakers.
Yes.
But at that stage in this part of the country, it's dark, and at this time of the year, it's dark until 6:30, 7 o'clock. Should we, just to clarify, so what you're suggesting or what I'm hearing is get
Yeah.
outside within 30 minutes of wakening, but
Hmm.
does that still have the same impact if it's dark outside, or is this
Yeah.
30 minutes from sunrise?
Yeah, it's such a good call out. And if we can align our sleep wake schedules to be aligned with the rhythms of nature, that would be ideal. How can we set up our wake up time and bedtime to ideally kind of shift throughout the seasons? That would be amazing. Unfortunately, we're also dealing with my arch nemesis, daylight saving time, which is just so ridiculous and problematic and a man-made construct for no good reason, that totally throws us off. But if you can align a bit with those rhythms, that would be ideal. So then you can get yourself outside and there is the presence of that sunlight. But if we can't, because I understand that it certainly might not work for everyone. So then this is where things get a little dicey and kind of controversial. There's different approaches to this. So one, I would say from sort of the mainstream circadian advice would be, oh, well, get yourself a light box. And then you have a light box that you're exposed to. So you're getting that bright light exposure on the first half of your day. If you've got still a long stretch of time until the sun is out, then do that. There are concerns from sort of this newer approach looking at, say, quantum biology and sort of the many aspects that could be hit on from certain small things that we do and how that could have a cascading set of results. So there is a concern that, say, you use that light box and the activating effect is that it's communicating to the body that that's the closest thing to, say, solar noon, when the sun is the brightest out in the middle of the day, because that's when you would get such a large shot of bright light, more of that blue rich light directly above your head. And so even the angle matters. So, and it would it would be so beautiful and easy if there was just this simple thing, oh, just turn on a light. But it turns out that our bodies are really nuanced with the information that they're gathering from the types of light in our environment, even from the angle that it is, from the wavelengths of light, from the duration of light that you're exposed to, et cetera, et cetera. So what I have my people do, what I do, is instead utilizing red light until the sun is up. And that's when, so it's not as disruptive and cortisol inducing, to get that huge shot, because there is a real physiological drug like effect that happens based on light, and it's phototherapy. So the types of light that you're exposed to will have a measurable result. So instead, if you could explore what might happen if you use red light until the sun is up, and then you're properly getting that sunlight anchoring, that could be beneficial. Now, if we think, and people might hear this and be like, "Oh my gosh, this is such a change to my lifestyle," right? But if you think about it, we're dealing with a familiarity effect, and we're dealing with the recency effect of the fact that it's only been 145 years since Edison created the light bulb, and yet we think, well, this is just what life is. You turn on lights, and of course. But this is a brand new phenomenon in the world of the length of time that humans have been on this planet. And previously, if the sun wasn't up, you weren't getting light, like unless you turn on a candle or whatever. And so we have to understand that how we think of setting up and just augmenting our days are really having biological impacts. And it's relatively new and very weird for our biology to be experiencing this sort of manipulation.
So and there's loads to cover, and I'm conscious of time because the depth of your knowledge is just incredible. So let's again, I'm quite a simple thinker, and I just
Yeah.
it's almost give me the steps of
Totally. Yeah.
of how I should live my day, map out my
Yes.
perfect day, and I'll follow them, Molly. I promise you.
Totally.
So
Love it.
it's a case of okay, get outside if you can.
Yeah.
Sorry, step it back up. Ideally, your sleep pattern should align to kind of the sunrise sunset kind of rhythm,
Mm,
and that to me sounds a little bit challenging
yeah.
and maybe contrarian to some of the other sleep advice which we'd hear, which is keep your bedtime, and your wake up time the same. Keep them kind of quite regular as well. So
Oh,
maybe
I
maybe a
really
direct.
That's important. I'm glad you said that. Because we have two anchor habits that we speak about in Sleep is a Skill. So we talk about the anchor habits of light dark and having bright days, dark nights. And the second anchor habit is a consistent wake up time. Now, the only call out is just in the seasons, it might just shift a little bit from winter. And, unfortunately, because we're dealing with daylight saving time, clearly you can hear that I have a shtick against that. But having said that, so you might have a little bit of adjustment in your seasons, and understandably so, when the sun is setting at say 4:30 p.m. or setting at 8:30 p.m., you might adjust a little bit of your habits. But besides that, it is crucial to maintain a consistent wake up time around 7 days a week and choosing and selecting that time. And I'm simply saying that if you have the ability to somewhat have it in alignment with that sunrise and sunset, there could be an argument that that could be beneficial as you're thinking about what is my consistent wake up time. But at the end of the day, we want you to choose a time that you can really set up as a lifestyle so that it becomes something that you hopefully are actually empowered by and not just at the effect of. So every time that alarm goes off, you're not just, oh, why? And instead, you're actually like, oh, I designed this. I like this time. This is a great time to wake up. So how can we do that? Because that is absolutely one of the most important places to begin that has its own anchoring kind of aspect to it. And then I would just say from what you shared too of like, okay, so how do I take this information and make it practical? Um, I would share a couple resources to further dive into this because it does take some of that playing with and also knowing where you are on the planet will impact your kind of timing. So, the Circadian Life app is an app that I love for beginning in on this whole journey because it will help you then set up all kinds of circadian cues, including what time you're waking up, what time you're getting sunlight, understanding more about the nuance of sunlight, the UVA, the UVB, when these things are important, and including then other things that we, won't even likely have time to get into, but I will share or allude to that there's temperature timing is another Zeitgeber. Meal timing is a really powerful Zeitgeber. Exercise timing, thought timing. Our thoughts have their own kind of circadian nature, which is really interesting. And then drug timing, of course. So looking at your coffee, your alcohol, your THC, your supplements, your prescriptions, etc. So there's lots of cool cues that we can start to organize in our schedule, and the Circadian Life app will help with that. And then Another app that can be helpful is the D-Minder app to, that's a whole other conversation too, the amount of vitamin D that you are loaded up with or maybe insufficient on, which many people are, is going to make a huge impact on your sleep results. So we know that vitamin D is part and parcel to serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin. So, all of us that want to bolster our melatonin, if we're not having sufficient vitamin D, that's going to be a problem. So DMinder is an app that could support this. And then I would say, lastly, then you can also look at things like the Lux or light meters, and those are just downloadable apps that you can start looking at the environment around you and see how much light am I being exposed to, and then what would that say about my circadian health. So meaning you can download some of these apps, so like light meter for instance, and then you use your smartphone, you measure the light in your environment. And I've done this in like a Starbucks, and you come back with, say, like 300 lux in your environment. Well, that is woefully insufficient for our goals of having brighter days and darker nights, because we're looking to be hitting well over 10,000 lux ideally throughout the course of the day. So you can start then going outside, and then you'll see, oh, wow, just even on these cloudy days, you're still getting often thousands and thousands of lux. So it will start to get you to become a bit of a light connoisseur, and understanding the physiological impacts. Because if you want to make melatonin, you have to get a large dose of light. How much throughout the whole course of the day? Well, we just had Dr. Sachin Panda, who's a subject matter expert around these topics, and his lab found at least about an hour at least outside to produce and bolster the amount of melatonin that you are able to create. So that could be kind of a rolling average to hit at.
Oh my goodness, there's so much in here, and I'm going to try and get as much as we can before we finish the
Yeah.
podcast. I love the anchor habits of the ratio between light dark, and you've answered a question which I was my next question was, what is the ratio there between light dark, but you
Yeah.
suggested that actually at least 1 hour outside during the day will help optimize our melatonin levels, which will ultimately
Yes.
serve our sleep quality. And then the second anchor habit, which is having that consistent wake up time. And I think people listening, and certainly I've been guilty of this, going, well, it's the weekend
Yeah.
and I'll just take another hour in bed, and
Oh,
gift myself that
yeah.
additional hour. But what I'm hearing is, be very cautious or careful in doing that. Some
Mhm.
of the other things which I'm intrigued about, but I appreciate we won't be able to go into them at a significant depth. But if you can just give us some guidance, is around the timing of meals, which you've mentioned, and especially the timing. I suspect the last meal of the day. I suspect
Yeah.
is important. The exercise timing. Whether that should be morning, during the day, evening, in terms of optimizing sleep, and then the my favorite drug of choice, which is caffeine. I love
Oh,
coffee,
me too.
but I'm highly sensitive to it. I typically have
Yeah.
one, maybe a maximum of 2 cups of coffee a day. And given my own kind of research or Google knowledge on this, it's important not to have caffeine after 12 o'clock, as there may still impact your sleep, even after, or even if you have it before 12 o'clock. So maybe just give us a
Yeah.
high level of the meal timing, the exercise timing, and for many I suspect their drug of choice, which is caffeine.
Oh, so good. Yeah. Okay, so the meal timing one, if people want to go in deeper, the Circadian Code is a book that can kind of lay out this kind of approach or the blueprint, and that is by that Dr. Sachin Panda that I was mentioning. And so he is some of the largest bulk of research out of the Salk Institute. So we've got decades of research in looking at how your meals, just simply having anything but water. So coffee would fall into this, or, just even a small bite of whatever. All of these things kind of turn on our digestive clocks. And so starting to think about when is our first bite of food, or, any of those items, anything but water, because that's kind of turning on our digestive clock. So when's the first bite and really the last bite of food, and understanding, one, how long is that window? Because for many people, we're finding that they're eating in some way, shape, or form throughout largely just about the entire time that they are awake. And this is a problem, even if it's small things or little snacks or what have you. And this is problematic because we're not giving our bodies and those clocks time to the cueing mechanism that it is now night. So that last bite of food is getting pushed out to much too close to bed. And so it's confusing those clocks, and then not allowing for true digestion, to that rest and digest period to really happen, that parasympathetic time, because we're constantly giving our bodies like homework to keep digesting, which is a taxing process. Blood flow has to, all be pumped to the stomach to deal with that homework assignment. And we don't want the body to be having to do that while we're sleeping, because it takes away reserves and resources from all the other reparative mechanisms. So the most gentle approach, and the approach that has the most research, is the last bite of food happening at least about 3 hours before bed. Now, I will say that we're also seeing newer evidence that could be pointing to longer than that, decently longer than that. So meaning, I just had a conversation with the vice president of performance sciences at Whoop, and they are undergoing a study about to be released where they looked at the difference between 4 hours before bed and 2 hours before bed. And they found the 4 hour before bed group for the last bite of food was like the performance across the board is much more advantageous. So that would be one. But then we also see smaller research studies looking at even longer than that. So 5, 6 hours more. If some people have heard of maybe Brian Johnson, the guy who's testing out all kinds of things for his, he's having the last bite of food like 10 hours before bed. So there's lots of range, that could be available. But we do see that bare minimum, having that like 3 to maybe even 4 hours before bed, and then expanding and playing. Because I've seen from a wearable perspective some real benefits as we even play with that last bite of food. Sometimes going into that 5, 6 hours needs more research, but we do see often heart rate go down, HRV, heart rate variability, go up, respiratory rate go down. So we know that the meal timing piece can be really, really important. But this all goes back to circadian rhythm intermittent fasting is what this is under. And so circadian rhythm intermittent fasting is simply that you're eating most of your food when the sun is out, and then you're not eating most of your food when the sun has set. And if
I,
you think about it, right, that would make the most sense,
that
because,
I love
right?
that's
Simple.
super practical. And again,
Yeah.
trying to keep it super practical. And
Yeah.
something that I heard recently, my wife shared this with me as a simple kind of just a simple way to remember when you should have your last meal. She's a nutritionist, and she picked up this kind of 3-2-1 habit of, don't eat anything 3 hours before bed, don't
Yeah.
do any work 2 hours before bed, and don't look at anything kind of bright lights 1 hour before bed. And those kind of things really resonate with me, that kind of three two
Yes.
one formula. And I know it's much more complex and much more
Sure.
nuanced than that, but
Right. But it
um
helps.
so absolutely, as a start,
Yeah.
and then certainly we will reference in the show notes the Circadian code and the
Mm.
Circadian life app for those who want to go deeper. Just in terms of exercise, again, likely nuanced, morning, noon, or night.
Yeah, good question. Is nuanced, but there's a little bit more flexibility than the meal timing, surprisingly. But I will say it still tends to be similar to circadian meal timing. When the sun is out, you're eating, you're also ideally kind of moving, like a strong exercise happening when the sun is out, also. However, we do see more latitude. So, like some gentle walks, some yoga, some stretching, all those, sort of things seem to actually have some benefit or application in the evenings. And we do know that exercise is so crucial to our sleep results. Muscle mass is important for our sleep results and thermoregulation. And there's so much there. So I certainly don't want people to hear, "Oh, well, I can't work out until later, so I'm not going to work out." Like, we want you to work out. However, it's if you can just make sure that. So, for instance, I've had clients that come in and they're doing whatever CrossFit or some hit at 8 p.m. under blue lights, and it's they try to go to bed at 10, and that could be obviously problematic. But what we would like to do is play around with, could we, one, have some benefit based on what time you are working out? Like, for instance, we do see benefits around the afternoon workouts for lowering of injury risk because your body's more warmed up by that point, the dynamic nature of your thermoregulation. So there does seem to be some benefits there for many people. However, if you're looking to phase advance, meaning you want to move your when you're sleepy, if you want to move it earlier, there can be some argument to be made for first working out when you first wake up, because that seems to be helpful to tire you out, almost like a kid or something, that you get all that hit of movement, and you're telling your body it's time to wake up. And this is what we do here, at say whatever 6 a.m. or something. And then you have that shot of exercise that's wake promoting, and that acts as a Zeitgeber too. But I would say by and large, it's kind of moving your body when it's sunny or when the sun is out. And then you can get away with some movement, but just try to not have it too vigorous, too late into the evening.
Makes sense. And caffeine.
Yeah.
What what um what can we do to still enjoy our caffeine but not have it disrupt our sleep?
Well, a couple things. One, as you kind of pointed to, so different people can metabolize caffeine at different rates, and you can test for this. So you can see if you're slow or fast metabolizer. So that could impact some of the timing. Also, different points in your life. Pregnancy can affect, the length of time you're metabolizing other issues. So you can play with this, but to your point, if you're finding that you're have that sensitivity, you might move it a little bit earlier than some of, because often you hear probably some standard advice of before like 2 p.m. and that sort of thing. But if you're finding that you're sensitive, what you're pointing to of like the 12 p.m. or for some people even earlier, could be beneficial. And so you can track some of these. This is one of the reasons why I love the wearable data, because we can see some of these results as we change our behaviors. And then I would also say there's other alternatives, like pyroxanthine is a newer kind of caffeine alternative. And that one is more of the downstream effect from caffeine and seems to have less of the hits on adenosine. So almost has like a lot of the benefits of caffeine, but without some of the jittery, anxiety promoting, and then the messing with adenosine in the same way that then could hit at sleep. And adenosine being that kind of, tells your body that you are sleepy or not sleepy. And so caffeine tends to hit at that. So pyroxanthine could be an alternative in your afternoons or early afternoon that you could explore.
Paraxanthian. Is this like decaffeinated? Is this the scientific term for decaffeinated coffee? Or I haven't heard this term before.
Yeah, it's sort of newer. So pyroxanthine, it's something that you can get in both tablets, or you can get it has been made in kind of a coffee form as well. But there's certainly some of the benefits that kind of the hit on your cognition and your ability to kind of focus in some of the ways that we would like to have, presumably with coffee, that we seem to have some of those benefits with pyroxanthine, and yet without hitting at keeping you up later into the evening. So this is much news. It's within the last, I want to say, like 2 years or so, kind of a newer advancement of that we're able to synthesize this, have access to this in this newer way.
I now understand why you have a podcast and a company devoted to this, Molly. The fact is, the last hour has absolutely flown, and I feel we have literally only scratched the surface. There's so much that I want to ask you. So, I think a nice way to bring this to put a wrapper on this is to indulge myself. I've printed out my aura trend for the last 90 days. You've mentioned
Mm,
wearables a number
sure.
of times. You're working with Whoop. You're wearing your aura ring.
Yeah.
I wear an aura ring. I track my sleep. So what I'd like to do is share with you my sleep trend, my 90-day sleep trend for the from my aura, and if you could then share with our listeners, and this is for my benefit, map out what the perfect day would be in order for me to optimize my sleep. So is that okay? Can I do that?
Sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So it's saying here that my bedtime on average is 12 minutes past 10. Typical is between 9 to 11. My latency is 13 minutes and the range is 5 to 17 minutes. My REM sleep is 21% and the range typically is 20 to 26%. My average total sleep time is 6 hours, 24 minutes. And that's typically within a range of 5 to 7 hours. And my wake up time is on average 6 a.m., with the typical range being 5 to 7 a.m. So how am I doing, and what can I do to make this better?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, there's a lot that people can do, and yet some of the cliff notes just on what you're sharing. One, I would be curious as we kind of play with certain aspects of a sleep optimization, if your total sleep duration might shift. So I would be interested. And so some people do skew a little bit less, like shorter sleep durations. And as I noted, when we get sub 6 hours, we do have some concerns around a number of things for health implications. But we do see some latitude between the 6 and 7 hour domain. But there is that call out as far as the majority, that 7 to 9 hours being some of our recommendation for healthy adults. So I'd be interested, if we tweaked some things, would your sleep duration augment a bit? Um, and that can take some time, and there could be more at play. This is why now every person we work with wears the Oura ring, just as a flat place to begin. And then we're often adding in things like continuous glucose monitors. We're testing to make sure we're not missing any sleep disorders like sleep apnea or otherwise. Then we're also often taking different types of blood work and urine analysis, and see if anything's at play from, say, like a nutritional deficiency or hormonal imbalance, or reasons that we might be trending on shorter sleep times or that could be impacting our sleep. So I would say these things can often be multifaceted in understanding what might be at play for you.
So I'm
Um,
sensing a C minus here with lots of work to do.
for opportunities, you know? So
More opportunities.
opportunities. And
What
we don't know.
else?
So I don't want to at all land for people like, oh no, well, if I'm sleeping 6.5 hours, it's a problem. It might not be a problem for you. Like, we'd want to learn more about So for instance, one thing I like about you have the Oura ring, with the Oura ring, and Whoop does this, and we can learn a bit about even the behavior or shape of your heart rate throughout the course of the night. How often are we kind of in that, hammock shape is kind of what it was advantageous, but it doesn't have to be just like that. I don't want to stress people out. But some information around what your heart rate is averaging at, what's your HRV, what's your respiratory rate, some of those nervous system indicators can be really helpful for us. So what I would say is it's multifaceted. Also, sleep staging. I know we hit on like REM and those sort of things. They tend to be the least accurate information on our wearables. They're getting better. And actually, Oura Ring did just compare against 1,500 nights in a sleep lab. So they are a bit closer to sleep lab results than some of what we might see elsewhere. But sleep lab results, even the gold standard, have disagreement around mid 80% of the time. So like 85% or so of the time. There's disagreements even there. So there are questions on some of those readouts. So I don't want people to get too stressed with those. Whereas the nervous system readouts like heart rate, HRV, respiratory rate, et cetera, do tend to be a bit more higher accuracy. And you can learn a lot about yourself with some of those. And then the fragmentation. So I'd want to learn more about the number of wake ups you're having throughout the course of the night, how
Three
regular. Yeah.
at least.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, that would leave some room for improvement and understanding of the why that you are waking up is, very commonly sleep apnea or upper air resistance syndrome, mouth breathing, those things could be at play. And as we rectify those, then often wake ups really markedly drop. Or the glucose stability. So we know out of America anyway, the average numbers are around anywhere from 88 to 92% of people are dealing with metabolic dysfunction. So if you put a continuous glucose monitor on the average person, there can be ups, downs, and all arounds. And so then when you get into the nights, when that crashes, there can be more of those wake ups in alignment with that. Those are just a couple reasons for wake ups. So we'd want to learn more about those. So I'd say, hopefully, I'm not meaning to leave people with, there's so much to do. Instead, I hope that it's an opportunity to get curious about this thing that we're doing every single night, a third of our lives, and maybe begin with that Circadian Life app and just start to play with bringing in some of these levels of consistency around things that can really shape and strengthen your circadian rhythm. And then we keep building from there.
This is just fascinating. What we're saying is, look, and you know, I often use the stat we've typically 900 months on this planet. 300 of those are spent sleeping.
Yeah.
I've already utilized 300 of my average life, so
Yeah.
I'm running out. So what we're saying is, look, given the fact that this is so critical to our performance as business leaders, it is an area of our lives, and a significant area of our lives, which we should become more familiar with in terms of optimizing that. Before we move into the close, Molly, is there anything you want to pick up on that we haven't? And I know it's a big, wide-ranging question, a big, wide-ranging topic, but anything else that you feel is important to mention to our business leaders before we move into the close?
Yeah, really good question. I would just kind of put a bow on it with saying, to take on or to consider taking on this concept that sleep really is a skill. And like any skill that you might have on your list of things to test out, maybe you've always wanted to learn the piano or whatever. With all of these skills, we have this opportunity to start at, sleep 101 and kind of set aside what we might think that we know about some of these areas and how we've managed things, and kind of take on that beginner's mind with experimentation. I definitely would suggest the tracking piece, because then you can have some metrics along this journey and see, what's really serving you, not serving you. And and then hopefully beginning to get some of that level of fascination with this area of life, and knowing too that sadly systemically we're in an environment where if you thought that your doctor might have caught some of the red flags for you, and since you haven't been told, oh, I should get a sleep study or what have you, and think that then you're fine, unfortunately, we know that the average doctor, even out of Harvard Med, is getting about 2 hours of training on sleep. This, again, thing we do around 26 years of our lives. So sadly, it's unlikely that they're going to be spotting some of the signals or symptoms that might prompt, oh, we want to look at this area. And I would argue that every single one of us, just based on how many things in our society are taking us outside of these kind of natural sleep promoting structures or behaviors, then there's an opportunity for all of us to get curious about this area.
Brilliant. Molly, I have a closing tradition on the show to invite from our listeners, or to invite from our guests rather, assuring, given their experience and their knowledge, 3 timeless takeaways.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So timeless takeaways that I would, to share, I suppose. Um, Most of mine are going to be sleep focused, I would say. So, the one, prioritization of this area of life. Two, that your biology influences your psychology. So, any mood state that you might be struggling with or what have you, to look to how you're moving your body, and knowing that that can spill over to from our body to our mind. And then three, that your environment is even more crucial than I think we might ever realize. I kind of Nostradamus prophesized that I believe building biology will become really an important area in the future, right? If we're spending at least 93% of our time indoors, it makes sense that we would outfit our environment to support our biology. And unfortunately, many of us our environment's not doing that. So there's this opportunity to audit the environments that we're in and influence those to change how we're showing up, how we're feeling, how we're sleeping.
I've just heard a new term for the first time, building biology. I love that. That
Yes.
makes complete sense.
Right.
We will revisit this at another time, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Molly, it's been a real privilege to have you on the show today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where best to find you? Where would you direct them to?
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for making this kind of format and this forum to share some of this information. It's so important. And they can go to sleepisaskill.com, and that can serve as kind of a launching pad. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter. And you can take our sleep assessment and get kind of tailored information back around how you're sleeping. And then from there, if you are looking to take things to the next level, we have a sleep optimization cohort that you can join and get, to kind of go through an 8-week long program, wearing the Aura Ring, and then really transforming those sleep results throughout that time. And then if you want even more one-on-one options, we do have one-on-one options available.
Amazing. You have a wonderful podcast. You've referenced it, Sleep is a Skill, the number 2 sleep podcast in the world. So again, I would encourage people who are interested in the topic, and what we're saying is you certainly should be, to check that out. Molly, it sounds like you're scaling Sleep as a Skill. So what is next for you?
Oh, so good. So a number of things, looking to put this also into book form, outside of just, the courses and all those things. So book. We're taking on much more from a corporate clientele now. So kind of having that ripple into some of the cultural climate in our workplace, and also just aiming to get this message out in as even conversations that maybe had previously. So for a long time, I'd be speaking to more kind of biohackers and health and wellness aspected individuals, but really looking to kind of break down some of those walls and share more across the board to anyone who would listen of how important this area is in my estimation.
Well, look, thank you once again. I love your passion for this. It's just infectious. I love your wonderful energy. Thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us today. I wish you every success in your new book. It sounds like you're committed to that now, and your courses and everything that you're doing. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Molly.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and more to come. Love the energy you bring to these topics. It's so important.
Thank you. Take care.